Hey everyone, this is Taehyung. Before we begin, I just want to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop your country in the comments. I like imagining how far these words might travel. There are moments late at night when the world finally quiets down, when the cameras are off, the schedules are done, and even my thoughts slow enough for me to hear my own breathing. In those moments, life feels strange. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. And that's usually when memories show up uninvited. Not the ones everyone knows, but the softer ones. The ones that stay with you long after the applause fades. For a long time, I didn't think I'd ever talk about this. Not because it wasn't real, but because it felt fragile, like something that could disappear the moment it was spoken out loud. Love, for me, was always something distant, something poetic, something I painted into songs, into lyrics, into images people could admire from afar. But it wasn't something I believed I would hold quietly in my own life. Not again. Until you. I grew up learning how to endure, how to stay still when everything inside me wanted to run, how to move forward even when the path felt narrow and watch from every angle. Discipline came early, responsibility came faster, and with every year the space between who I was and who the world expected me to be felt smaller and smaller. I learned how to smile on cue, how to turn exhaustion into elegance, how to make silence look like confidence. The people beside me became my constant, my family in ways that didn't need explaining. We learned each other's moods without words. We carried one another through days when doubt clung to us like a second skin. Love existed there, deep, loyal, unbreakable, but it wasn't romantic love. It was shared survival, shared dreams, shared weight. And for a long time I thought that was enough. Romantic love felt impractical, dangerous even, like something meant for a version of me that didn't exist anymore. Someone without eyes following his every step. Someone who could make mistakes privately. I told myself I didn't need it. That art was enough. That music could fill every quiet space. And sometimes it did. But even the most beautiful music ends. And when it does, you're left alone with yourself. That's when the questions start. That's when you ask who you are without the stage, without the lights, without the noise telling you who to be. That's when you arrived. You didn't come into my life loudly. There was no moment I could point to and say, this is where everything changed. It was subtle, almost invisible, just presence, just warmth. Conversations that didn't feel like performances. Silence that didn't demand anything from me. You listened not to the image, not to the persona, but to the parts of me that rarely felt seen. With you, I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to be impressive. I didn't have to be strong all the time. I could be quiet, uncertain, tired, and somehow that was enough, more than enough. There were days when the weight of expectations pressed so heavily against my chest that even breathing felt like effort. On those days, you didn't offer solutions. You just stayed. I had spent so many years believing love had to be intense to be real, explosive, dramatic, something that shook the ground beneath your feet, but what you showed me was different. Love as consistency, love as patience, love as choosing to stay even when nothing exciting was happening. It scared me at first, because steady love doesn't distract you from yourself. It forces you to see who you really are. I noticed small things changing, the way mornings felt less heavy, the way laughter came easier, the way silence stopped feeling empty. You reminded me that wanting something just for myself wasn't selfish, that not everything had to be measured by numbers, charts, or applause, and that realization came with fear, because wanting something real means risking losing it. I carried that fear quietly. I didn't talk about it, not to you, not to anyone. I told myself I was protecting everyone, but the truth was I was protecting myself from the possibility of being hurt again. Love asks you to be vulnerable, and vulnerability is terrifying when your life has been built around control. There were nights when doubt crept in without warning, when I wondered if I was strong enough to hold on to this without letting it slip through my fingers. On those nights, I thought about the journey that brought me here, the years of sacrifice, the hands that pulled me back up when I stumbled. Love had always been present in my life. I just hadn't recognized it in this form. With you, I started to understand something important. Love doesn't take away from who I am. It adds to it. It doesn't weaken my passion. It deepens it. It gives meaning to the reasons I keep creating, keep moving forward even when the road feels endless. You didn't save me. You didn't fix me. You simply stood beside me and allowed me to remember how to believe. Looking ahead stopped feeling so intimidating. The future didn't feel like a threat anymore. It felt open, like a blank canvas instead of a test I was afraid to fail. I didn't know what it would look like, and for the first time, I was okay with that. Somewhere between the chaos and the calm, between the stage lights and the quiet nights, you made me trust my heart again. I didn't know then that loving you would change everything. I didn't know that the quiet I cherished would soon turn into something heavier, sharper. I didn't know that choosing love would eventually ask me to choose courage too. But that night, standing there with you, I believed something I hadn't believed in a long time. I believed love could exist without destroying me. The night didn't end the way I thought it would. It never does when feelings begin to sharpen instead of soften. I remember the room being too quiet, the kind of quiet that turns every breath into a confession. You stood there with your arms crossed, not defensive, not closed, just steady. That steadiness unsettled me more than anger ever could. "You're running again," you said. I laughed, because laughing has always been easier than admitting the truth. You say that like it's a crime. "It is," you replied calmly, "when you leave parts of yourself behind." The words landed harder than any accusation. I turned away, staring out at the city lights through the window. I'd seen those lights from so many hotel rooms that they'd begun to blur into one endless memory. "You don't understand what it's like," I said. "Every step I take is watched. Every word is twisted. Loving someone openly isn't just brave, it's dangerous." "Then why did you let me in?" you asked. That question cracked something open in me. There was no clean answer. The truth was messy and terrifying and honest. "Because I was tired of being alone," I said quietly. "Because with you, I don't have to pretend." Silence stretched between us, thick and electric, the kind that dares you to either speak or break. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and insistent, pushing me forward whether I was ready or not. "I don't want a safe version of you," you said finally. "I want the real one." I turned back to you and really looked. For the first time, I felt the weight of that request. Being real means being vulnerable. It means letting someone see the doubts that creep in when the applause fades, the exhaustion that settles deep in your bones, the fear that one wrong step could cost everything you've built. "They're my family," I said almost defensively. "Every choice I make affects them." "I know," you answered, "and that's exactly why this scares you." Your understanding disarmed me. I sat down heavily, running my hands through my hair, frustration and longing tangled together. "Sometimes it feels like my heart belongs to too many people," I admitted. "I don't know how to give it to you without taking something away from them." You moved closer, not touching, just close enough that I could feel your presence like warmth. "Love doesn't subtract," you said softly. "It expands." The word echoed in my head. Expands the way music does when harmonies come together, when voices don't compete but lift each other higher. I thought about the years of shared sweat and laughter, the arguments and reconciliations, the way we learned to read each other without speaking. I thought about how they had always pushed me to grow, never to shrink. Maybe love didn't have to be a choice between worlds. Maybe it could be a bridge. Earlier that day, we'd all been crowded around a table, teasing each other about nothing and everything. Someone had glanced at me with that knowing look, the kind that sees straight through careful silence. "You look different," they'd said, "happier, or maybe just more scared." I hadn't answered then. Standing in front of you, I finally did. "I'm scared," I said, "because if this falls apart, I don't know how to write a song about it. I don't know how to hide it." "I don't want to be a secret you're ashamed of," you replied. "I'm not ashamed," I said quickly. "I'm terrified." The honesty felt raw, almost painful, but also freeing. You reached out then, fingers brushing my wrist just briefly, but it sent a shock through me. Not because it was forbidden, but because it was grounding. Look at me, you said. I did, and in your eyes I didn't see demands or ultimatums. I saw patience, strength, a quiet refusal to be half-loved. I won't ask you to choose, you continued, but I won't disappear just because you're afraid of being seen. That was the moment everything shifted. Not because the fear vanished, but because I realized something stronger was standing in front of it. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands still and waits for you to catch up. The days that followed were a storm. Rumors surfaced like they always do. Whispers hardened into headlines. Curiosity sharpened into speculation. Every notification felt like a threat. Every knock on the door made my pulse jump. Around me, people moved with practiced calm, professionalism shielding them from the chaos outside. Still, glances were exchanged. Silent check-ins offered. "You okay?" someone asked quietly after rehearsal. I nodded, then shook my head, then nodded again. The truth was complicated. That night I called you. I didn't plan what to say, I just needed to hear your voice. "I don't know how this ends," I confessed, "but I know I don't want to keep lying." There was a pause long enough to make me nervous. Then you spoke. "Whatever comes, I want it to be honest." Honest? The word followed me everywhere. Onto the stage, into the studio, into the quiet moments when I lay awake staring at the ceiling. It followed me into conversations that mattered. Conversations about boundaries, about trust, about how love can exist without destroying everything else in its path. The tension didn't disappear. If anything, it intensified. There were arguments, sharp and emotional, fueled by exhaustion and fear. There were moments when I pulled back and moments when you pushed forward, when we both wondered if wanting each other was enough to bridge the distance between our worlds. But there were also moments of undeniable closeness. Late-night talks that stretched until morning. Laughter that cut through the heaviness like light through clouds. The realization that even in conflict, we were choosing to stay. One night after everything felt like it was about to explode, you said, "I don't need promises, I need presence." And for the first time, I understood what that meant. Not perfect outcomes, not grand gestures, just showing up again and again, especially when it's uncomfortable. I didn't know what the world would say next. I didn't know how loud the noise would get. But I knew this much. Loving you had changed the way I saw myself. It made me braver, not reckless. Softer, not weaker. It reminded me that even in a life shared with millions, the most powerful moments can still happen in quiet rooms between two people choosing honesty over fear. And that choice, no matter how controversial, no matter how fragile it felt, was becoming the truest song I'd ever learned how to sing. The morning after everything almost fell apart, the air felt heavier, like the world had decided to hold its breath and wait for me to move. I woke up before my alarm, staring at a ceiling I'd memorized over too many restless nights. My phone was already buzzing on the table, notifications stacked like dominoes, ready to collapse with one careless touch. I didn't open them. Not yet. Instead, I sat there with my elbows on my knees, hands clasped together as if I were praying for clarity. The truth was, clarity had already arrived. I just wasn't sure I was brave enough to accept it. "You didn't sleep, did you?" a voice asked from behind me. I turned to see one of them standing in the doorway, arms folded, eyes sharp in that gentle way that always saw more than I wanted it to. "You look like you fought the whole night by yourself." "I kind of did," I admitted. They sat beside me without asking. That's how it's always been, no permission needed. "Is it them?" they asked quietly. I exhaled, "Yeah." There was no surprise in their expression, only concern. "You're shaking things up," they said. "You know that, right?" "I know," I replied. "But for the first time it doesn't feel like a mistake." Silence followed, not uncomfortable, thoughtful. Then they nodded. "Then don't let fear write the ending for you." Those words stayed with me when I finally checked my phone. Messages, headlines, half-truths dressed up as certainty. speculation sharpening into accusation. I felt anger rise, hot and protective, not for myself but for you, for the way your name was being twisted into something it was, for how easily people decided they owned the truth just because they were watching from a distance. I called you immediately. "Tell me you're okay," I said the second you answered. You laughed softly, but I heard the tension underneath it. "I should be asking you that." "They're saying things," I muttered, "things that aren't fair." "They never are," you replied, "but I'm still here." That simple sentence steadied me more than any reassurance could have. "I'm coming to see you," I said without thinking. There was a pause. "Are you sure?" you asked. "It might make things worse." "Or it might make things honest," I said. "I'm tired of hiding." When I arrived, the tension snapped into something electric the moment our eyes met. No music, no stage, no buffer, just us, raw and exposed. "You're really doing this," you said. "I am," I answered, "and I need you to tell me if you can handle what comes with it." You crossed your arms, jaw tight. "Don't talk to me like I'm fragile." "I'm not," I said quickly. "I'm asking if you're willing to stand in the storm with me." Your gaze didn't waver. "I already am." That's when the argument erupted. Not loud, but intense. Words colliding, emotions spilling. "You think I don't see the walls you keep building?" you asked. "And you think I don't see the risks you're taking by loving me?" I shot back. "I choose that risk," you said, "every day." "And what if one day I can't protect you from it?" I asked. "Then don't," you replied sharply. "Just don't abandon me in the name of protection." That hit harder than anything else. I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "I would never abandon you." "Then stop acting like you're halfway out the door," you whispered. Something inside me finally broke open. Not into pieces, but into truth. All the fear I'd been carrying spilled out at once. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Scared the world will turn you into a headline and forget you're a person. Scared I'll lose parts of myself trying to keep everyone else comfortable." You reached for my hands, gripping them tightly. "Look at me," you said. "I don't need you perfect, I need you present." The moment was interrupted by my phone ringing again. This time, it wasn't something I could ignore. I stepped away to answer, already bracing myself. "We need to talk," the voice on the other end said, serious and controlled. The meeting that followed was tense. Questions layered over questions. What was real? What wasn't? What I planned to do next? Every answer felt like a declaration of war against expectations that had wrapped themselves around my life for years. "You understand what this could cost," someone said. "Yes," I replied, "and I also understand what it costs me to keep pretending." When I left, my chest felt tight but strangely light at the same time, like I'd finally told the truth after holding my breath too long. That night, I returned to you exhausted, emotionally stripped bare. You didn't ask for explanations. You just sat beside me, shoulder against mine, grounding me in the present. "Whatever happens tomorrow," you said softly, "we face it together." I rested my forehead against yours, eyes closing. "You're the bravest thing in my life right now." You smiled, bittersweet. "No, we are." The controversy didn't fade overnight. If anything, it intensified. Opinions clashed. Support and criticism collided in equal measure. But through it all, something inside me stayed steady because for once I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. Late one evening, after a long day of rehearsals and interviews, someone looked at me and said, "You've changed." "I know," I answered. "How does it feel?" they asked. I thought of you, of the arguments and laughter, the fear and the courage, the way love had stopped being an idea and started being a decision. "It feels terrifying," I said, "and it feels real." That night, lying awake beside you, while the world stayed loud outside, I realized something I'd never fully understood before. Love didn't arrive to save me. It arrived to challenge me, to demand honesty, to ask me who I was willing to be when the applause faded and the noise died down. And for the first time, I knew my answer. I would be someone who chose truth over comfort, someone who stayed, someone who believed again that love, even when it's controversial, even when it's hard, is still worth everything. The storm wasn't over, but I wasn't running anymore. The storm didn't arrive loudly. It crept in through whispers, through looks exchanged behind closed doors, through the way the air shifted whenever I entered a room. I felt it before anyone said a word. That familiar tightness in my chest that always warned me something was about to break. You were sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through your phone, jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. I didn't need to ask what you were reading. The silence told me everything. "Say it," I said quietly. You looked up, eyes sharp, hurt barely contained. "They're calling me a distraction, a liability, someone who's ruining you." Anger flared so fast it surprised even me. "They don't get to decide that." "They think they do," you snapped. "They think they own you." I stepped closer. "No one owns me." "Then why does it feel like I'm the only one paying the price for that truth?" you shot back. The question sliced deeper than any headline. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Because part of me knew what you meant. You didn't have the shield I had built over years. You didn't have systems trained to absorb impact. You were standing out in the open, taking hits meant for me. "I never wanted you to get hurt," I said. "I know," you replied, voice cracking despite your effort to stay steady. "But knowing that isn't enough anymore." That was the first time I felt the ground truly shift beneath us. The days that followed were chaos. Meetings stacked on top of meetings. Conversations that felt less like discussions and more like negotiations about my own heart. Every word I spoke was weighed, measured, reframed into something strategic. "This isn't about love," someone said to me bluntly. "It's about timing, optics." "In my life?" I asked. They sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Your life affects millions." That sentence haunted me because it was true, and because it was incomplete, it never mentioned my right to feel, to choose, to love. When I saw you again, you were distant, not cold, just guarded, like someone bracing for impact. "They want me to step back," you said flatly. "Disappear for a while, make it easier." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Do you want that?" You hesitated. That hesitation terrified me more than any argument we'd had. "I don't know what I want anymore," you admitted. "I just know what I'm tired of." I reached for you, but you stepped away. "Don't," you said softly, "not like this." That night was brutal. Words spilled between us, messy and unfiltered. "I feel like I'm fighting an entire world just to stand next to you," you said. "And I feel like I'm being asked to tear myself in half to keep everyone else calm," I replied. "So where does that leave us?" "Still here," I said desperately, "still choosing each other." You shook your head. "You keep saying choosing, but all I see are compromises where I'm the one shrinking." The accusation burned because it wasn't entirely wrong. The breaking point came unexpectedly. A single sentence in an interview taken out of context turned into a wildfire overnight. Your phone rang nonstop. Mine was taken from me for my own good. I felt trapped in a version of reality where my voice didn't belong to me anymore. When I finally reached you, your voice was shaking. "They showed up at my place," you said. "Not fans, reporters." Rage, fear, and guilt collided inside me. "I'm coming." "You can't," you said quickly. "That would make it worse." "I don't care," I snapped. "I won't let you face this alone." "You don't get it," you said, tears finally spilling. "I already am." Those words shattered something fundamental inside me. Love wasn't supposed to feel like abandonment. When we met again, the tension was unbearable. You looked exhausted, eyes dulled by stress and disappointment. "Say it," I said hoarsely. "Say if you're done." You looked at me for a long time, too long. "I love you," you said, "but I don't know how to survive loving you like this." My knees nearly gave out. "Then tell me what to do." I need you to stop hiding, you said firmly. Not for the world, for me. I need to know you're not choosing comfort over us. The decision that followed wasn't dramatic. There was no speech, just a quiet clarity settling deep in my bones. I realized something painfully simple. If I kept trying to be everything for everyone, I would eventually become nothing for myself. The next time I was handed a script, I didn't follow it. I spoke carefully but honestly. I didn't explain everything. I didn't name names, but I made one thing clear. I was human. I was allowed to feel, and I wouldn't apologize for loving with sincerity. The reaction was immediate. Shock, praise, backlash, relief, everything at once. That night I went to you without knowing what I'd find. You opened the door slowly, eyes searching my face. "You did it," you whispered. "I did," I replied, "and I'm terrified." You laughed through tears. Me too. We didn't celebrate. We didn't pretend everything was fixed. We just held each other, breathing through the aftermath together. Whatever came next, we knew one thing. There was no more hiding. The world didn't slow down after that. If anything, it moved faster, louder, more demanding. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I could feel it in the way I walked into rooms without bracing myself first, in the way I no longer rehearsed apologies for emotions I hadn't even expressed yet. You noticed it too. "You're different," you said one morning, watching me from across the table as sunlight filtered through the curtains. "Not lighter, just steadier." "I stopped negotiating with myself," I replied. That steadiness was tested almost immediately. The narrative outside kept evolving, mutating into versions of the story I barely recognized. Some painted me as reckless, others as brave. Some turned you into a mystery, others into a villain. It was exhausting how easily people filled the gaps with their own imagination. There were days when the pressure seeped back in. When I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen, wondering if silence would be easier than honesty. Those were the moments I felt you reach for my hand, grounding me without saying a word. "I don't need you loud," you told me once. "I need you real." So I stayed real. In interviews, in rehearsals, in quiet conversations that mattered more than any headline. I spoke carefully, but I stopped pretending that love was something abstract or theoretical. I talked about balance, about growth, about learning how to protect what matters without erasing it. Some people listened. Others didn't. What surprised me most was the response I never expected. Messages from people who said they felt seen, from fans who admitted they had grown up believing love was something they'd have to sacrifice for success. They thanked me not for choosing romance, but for choosing honesty. Late one night, after reading through too many of those messages, I finally let myself cry. Not from sadness, from release. You found me sitting on the floor, back against the couch, eyes red and unfocused. "Come here," you said gently. I leaned into you, my head resting against your chest. I didn't know how heavy it was, I admitted, carrying everyone's expectations. "You don't have to carry them alone," you replied. That sentence felt like a promise, not a comfort. There were still arguments, real ones, about time, about boundaries, about how much of ourselves we could afford to give. Love didn't suddenly become easy just because it became honest, but it became solid, rooted, something we could build on instead of tiptoe around. One evening, after a long rehearsal that drained every last ounce of energy from my body, I confessed something I'd never said out loud before. "I used to think love was a distraction," I said, "something that would pull me away from who I was supposed to be." "And now," you asked. "And now I think it's the thing that keeps me from disappearing," I replied. You smiled softly, brushing your thumb across my knuckles. "Then don't let go of it." The moment that changed everything came quietly. No cameras, no audience, just us sitting side by side, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. "I need to know something," you said. If it ever becomes too much, if the world turns cruel again, will you still choose this? Yes. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Even if it costs you. I took a breath, especially then. That was when I understood the weight of what I was saying. Love wasn't about certainty. It was about commitment in the absence of guarantees. And for the first time in my life, that didn't terrify me. The next day, I walked into my schedule with a quiet resolve. I performed. I smiled. I worked harder than ever. Not because I was escaping something, but because I finally had something real to return to when the lights went off. People still talk, they always will. But when I come home to you, when the noise fades into background static, I remember why I chose this path, why I stopped hiding, why I let myself believe again. Love didn't save me from the storm. It taught me how to stand in it. And as long as you're standing there with me, I know I won't lose myself again. Time didn't heal everything. It clarified things. It showed me which fears were real and which ones had only grown loud because I kept feeding them silence. As weeks passed, the chaos settled into something more predictable, not calmer, just familiar. That familiarity was dangerous in its own way. There were moments when I caught myself slipping back into old habits, smiling automatically, saying I'm fine without checking if it was true, letting schedules dictate emotions instead of the other way around. You noticed before I did. You're drifting, you said one night as we lay awake, the city humming outside the window. I'm just tired, I replied. You're always tired, you said gently. That's not what I mean. I turned to face you. Then what do you mean? I mean you're starting to disappear again, you said, little by little. The words stung because they were spoken without accusation, just concern. I sat up, running a hand through my hair. I don't know how to balance this, I admitted, being present for you and still surviving everything else. You reached out, placing your palm over mine. I'm not asking for perfection, you said. I'm asking for honesty, even when the answer is I can't today. That conversation stayed with me long after the night ended. It followed me into rehearsal rooms, into interviews, into moments where I felt myself switching into performance mode. For the first time, I questioned it. Not the work, but the mask. One afternoon, someone asked me casually, "Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I paused longer than expected. Cameras were rolling. The room waited. "I'm learning how to be," I said finally. It wasn't a headline-worthy answer, but it was the truth. Later, alone, I wondered when happiness had become something I felt I needed permission to claim. Loving you had forced that question to the surface. It demanded I stop postponing my own life for some imaginary future where everything would be easier. That future doesn't exist. The tension reached a quiet peak when an opportunity came along that required distance. Months away, minimal contact, the kind of decision I would have accepted without hesitation before. "This could be big for you," you said when I told you. "It could," I agreed. "And for us?" you asked. I didn't answer right away. We sat with that silence, letting it stretch until it stopped being comfortable. "I don't want to be the thing that holds you back," you said softly. "And I don't want success that costs me you," I replied. The truth landed between us, heavy and undeniable. Choosing love didn't mean choosing stagnation, but choosing ambition without reflection had already taught me what emptiness felt like. "I need to rethink this," I said. You nodded. "That's all I'm asking." Rethinking changed everything. Not the opportunity itself, but how I approached it. Boundaries were drawn. Conditions were negotiated. Not everyone was pleased. Some called it unreasonable. I called it necessary. The first night after that decision, I slept deeper than I had in years. There were still days when doubt crept in, when I wondered if I was being selfish, or naive, or reckless. But every time I looked at you, grounded and honest and unwilling to let me lie to myself, I remembered why this mattered. One quiet evening you asked me, "Do you ever regret it, being open like this?" I thought carefully. "I regret the years I spent convincing myself I didn't deserve it," I said. "But this, no." You smiled, a real one. "Then we're okay." We weren't perfect. We weren't untouched by the world's pressure, but we were real, and real had become my definition of peace. Love didn't make my life simpler. It made it truer. And in a world that constantly demands performance, choosing truth felt like the bravest thing I had ever done. I don't know what the future will look like. I've stopped pretending I can predict it. What I know is this: I no longer walk toward it alone, and I no longer walk away from myself. You didn't just make me believe in love again. You made me believe I was allowed to live it. There's a strange quiet that comes after you stop running. Not peace exactly, but space. Space to notice the things you used to miss while moving too fast. I started noticing them everywhere. In the way my breathing slowed when I wasn't rushing to the next obligation. In the way laughter felt fuller when it wasn't followed by guilt. You noticed it too. "You're finally here," you said one evening as we walked side by side, no destination in mind. "I think I am," I replied, "for the first time." Being present didn't mean the world suddenly became kinder. Criticism still arrived. Expectations still knocked relentlessly, but they no longer dictated every reaction. I had learned something crucial: not every noise deserves a response. That lesson was tested during a public appearance I couldn't avoid. The room was polished, controlled, familiar. Faces trained to read between lines. Questions disguised as curiosity. One of them leaned forward and asked, "Do you think love has changed you?" I didn't look for approval before answering. "It reminded me of myself," I said, "before I learned to hide." The room went still, not shocked, processing. Later backstage, someone pulled me aside. "You know that answer will be dissected." "I know," I said calmly. "That's okay." That calm surprised me. It wasn't numbness. It was confidence rooted in something deeper than validation. It came from knowing that whatever interpretation followed, the truth had already been lived, not just spoken. That night when I returned to you, I didn't recount every detail. I didn't need to. You read it in my posture, in the way my shoulders finally relaxed. "You stood your ground," you said. "I stood in it," I corrected. "There's a difference." We talked long into the night about futures we used to avoid discussing. Not timelines or promises, but values. What we refused to sacrifice. What we were still willing to learn. Love had shifted from something fragile we protected into something strong enough to shape decisions. There was a moment when you asked, almost casually, "Do you ever miss who you were before all of this?" I thought about it honestly. About the version of me who stayed quiet, who smiled through confusion, who believed endurance was the same as strength. "I understand him now," I said, "but I don't miss him." That answer felt like closure. As time went on, the narrative outside softened, not because everyone agreed, but because consistency speaks louder than defense. I kept working, I kept showing up, and I kept choosing the same truth again and again. One afternoon, while practicing alone, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For once, I didn't feel like I was watching a stranger perform. I saw someone grounded, someone imperfect, someone real. I whispered to myself, "This is enough." Later, when I told you about that moment, you smiled and said, "I've been seeing that version of you for a while now." Love didn't arrive like a dramatic turning point. It unfolded slowly, through repetition, through showing up, through choosing presence over fear even when no one was watching. The world still moves fast, it always will. But now when it pulls at me, I know where I stand, and more importantly, who I stand with. Believing in love again wasn't about romance. It was about reclaiming my life. And this time, I'm not letting it slip away.